Okay, guys, so now we're going to work on the homework for the difference of two squares and factoring trinomials. Notice, this is the difference of two squares. This is going to give me two terms. Factoring trinomials, this will be when we have three terms. Make sure you guys notice the difference between when there's two terms and three terms as to which approach you're going to use. So this one has two terms, 1, 2. So I'm going to look to see, is there a difference of two squares? Is b squared, can I take the square root of b squared? Yes, it will be b. Can I take the square root of 1? Yes, it is 1. Is there a minus sign in between? Yes. And I forgot to check, was there a greatest common factor? That should have been the first thing I checked. But since there is a minus sign, no greatest common factor, if somebody said, yes, there is a greatest common factor, it is 1, that is true. 1 would be the greatest common factor. If 1 is the only greatest common factor, we just basically say no greatest common factor. So we take our, so I'm going to use my notes from earlier. Check for greatest common factor, take the square root of both squares. Then so I've taken the square root of both squares, I put them in parentheses, I add one, and I subtract the other. That is my answer. What I am saying is that these two terms, when multiplied together, will give me this. Okay. Same here. Take the square root of 9v squared, which would be 3v. I've got a minus sign, and the square root of 4, which is 2. I put that in parentheses. Do the same thing here. Then I add 1. Oh, oops. This should be 2. Because 2 times 2 is 4. I add 1. I subtract the other. I know that positive 2 times negative 2 is going to give me negative 4. 3v times 3v is going to give me 9v squared. There's my answer. Okay. Is there a greatest common factor here? I don't see a greatest common factor. I'm going to take the square root of 4, which is 2. The square root of x squared is x. The square root of 9 is 3. I add 1, subtract the other. And if you guys look to check your answer, if I were to multiply these, minus 3, 2x plus 3, 2x minus 3, I can check it and I should end up with this answer. 2x times 2x is 4x squared. 2x times 3 is 6x. 2x times negative 3 is negative 6x. 3 times negative 3 is negative 9. Then when I combine my like terms, I'm left with 4x squared, 0, those cancel each other out, minus 9. And they are the same. Okay, so now you'll notice that basically everything on this side, 1 through 6, well actually 6, what do you notice about 6? This is a perfect square, but this is not. What do you do with number 6? You can factor something out, but it's not going to factor out too small. Just keep factoring until you get, what does this term have that's the same as this term? An A, When I factor out an a from a squared, I get a. When I factor out an a from negative 8a, I get negative 8. I cannot factor these any smaller. That's as small as I can go. So that's the answer. Okay? All right, so now as we look down here, we notice these three are trinomials, meaning that there are three terms. 1, 2, 3. 3 terms. So that makes it a trinomial. We need to use our skills for a trinomial, and when we look at trinomials, the first thing we do is the GCF. Then the second thing we do is we create our X, and then last thing we're going to do is divide by our A, right? So let's put that into practice. So I'm going to look, is there a GCF? 2, 16, 30. What can I divide by all those terms to get that would be equal? Well, 2. So I would be left with r squared plus 8 plus 15. Then, so that's done. Now I'm going to create my X. And up in the top goes my AC, my A times my C. The A is now in front using this trinomial. A is the number in front of my r squared. My C is my 15. So the number in front of the r squared is 1. C is 15, so that would be 15. My B, oops, I forgot my R here. My B would be 8, the number in front of my R. This is B. So now we're looking for a number that multiplies to give you 15 and adds to give you 8. Sorry, that's so small. What factors of 15 are there? Well, first of all, I'm going to look and say, okay, both of these are positive, so I know both of my factors have to be positive. I know that 1 times 15 gives me 15, and I know that 3 times 5 gives me 15. And that's it. So which of these, positive 3, positive 5, or positive 1, positive 15, are going to add up to give me 8? Well, it's positive 3 and positive 5. So I'm going to take these two factors and set them equal, or add them to X, or R, I guess. You guys know me, I always pick X. So R plus 3, R plus 5. This is where I'm getting my 5. This is where I'm getting my 3. I'm using the factors from this side and just setting R plus 3, R plus 5. Then after that, I would divide this number by A. My A is 1. So I don't really have to do anything because that's going to give me the exact same answer. So my answer is R plus 3 times R plus 5, except I'm forgetting one thing, and that is this 2. I need to make sure I bring that 2 down to be included in my answer, because I factored it out initially and I don't want to forget about it. So again, you guys remember what we're doing here. What the goal is to take this trinomial and break it down into the smallest math terms that we can possibly think of. So for an example, remember if this is 12, we are going to break that down into 2 and 6, which we kind of did here, factored out a 2, we're left with a 6, But we can still break down that 6, and we need to break that down into, say, 2 and 3. So now these are our factors of 12. 2 times 3 times, or 2 times 2 times 3. These are our factors of this trinomial. It's the same concept. Okay, so if we were to use one that, let's do number 9, since that one does not have a greatest common factor. 5 does not equally divide into 34 or 24. So I've checked greatest common factor. I've checked it. We don't have one. Number 2, I'm going to use my x. So 5 times 24 is going to give me, I don't even know, hold on 5 times 24 equals 120. My b is 34. So now I'm looking for what number multiplies to give me, what two factors multiply to give me 120 and add to give me 34. So one thing I can do is I can take my 120 and figure out what are my factors. I have all positives, so both factors are going to be positive. If I don't know what my factors of 120 are, one thing that we kind of talked about was going to your y equals and going 120 divided by your x and going to your table. Then that lists all your factors of 120. So what do I have here? I've got 8 and 15, 10 and 12, 12 and 10. Let's go back up here. 6 and 20, 5 and 24, 4 and 30, 3 and 40, 2 and 60. So what two numbers are going to give me 34? If I were to add 8 and 15 together, that would be 23, 22, 26, 29, there we go, 34. So I can put 30 here and 4 there. So now I've got my factors of 120 that I'm going to set with x. So x plus 30, x plus 4. Then I have to divide by my a term. So when I divide 30 by 5, what am I left with? 6. When I divide 4 by 5, I'm not left with an even number. I'm left with a decimal. So I'm going to move my 5 in front of my x. 5x plus 4. This becomes my answer. So these are the two numbers, or two math terms, that when I multiply, I would get this answer. These are my factors of this trinomial. Okay. What about this one? You would have to look and see that this is a binomial. Two terms. How do we know? What do we know about binomials? We've only used the difference of squares with binomials. The square root of 16 is 4, but there is no square root of n. The square root of 12, I don't know that. So what am I going to do? This is not a difference of two squares. So I can't use that tool But what I do see is that there are n's in both terms. And I also know, because I'm really good at my math facts, that 4 divides into both of those evenly. So I do have a GCF of 4n. So I'm going to factor out my 4n and just see what happens. What am I left with? I'm left with 3n minus 4. Now I'm left with another binomial. Can I do anything with that? No, this is just like this one. These are my two factors for this. This is all I can do. Okay? It would be like saying, what if you had to factor out 4? You just factor out 2 and 2. There's nothing else you can do. You're done. So those are your two factors. And that's it. All right, guys, hopefully that helped.